Hello and welcome to the Against the Fence podcast with your host Breezy. Today's guest is a fighter in the bantamweight division called Cody Gibson. Now, this episode, in a weird way, I don't know, we'll find out. It means a lot to me. When we were talking about putting this podcast together, this is one of the people that I had super high up on my list that I wanted to get on here and have a deep conversation with, just because we've got some things that, as you'll see, we've got in common. And I really wanted to just kind of spend that time to speak about these things in detail. This is kind of the forefront of this whole podcast for me. It's to have that opportunity to sit down, to speak to individuals that I find genuinely interesting, and I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to speak to them in this way otherwise. So look, if you're new here, or if you've been here before and you haven't done so already, hit like, follow, subscribe, and let's get right into it. Enjoy. I got some weird questions to start off with, and you might be a bit weirded out by them, but we'll see your reaction. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Obviously, I know it's an important time for the year for you. What we really want to know, or what I really want to know, is after all the hard work and the analyst work you've been putting in recently with the pen and paper out, I seen on your story. Was it yesterday or the day before? How's the first NFL draft looking?
I got an A+ on my draft grade.
Okay.
And so I don't like that because that gives me too much hope. I like to go in with like low expectations, like, oh, I'm gonna bomb this year, and then like if I go like 500, I'm like happy. I must have done something right because I got a good grade on the draft thing. Yeah, last year was the worst year I've had, like as far as like paying attention to it and like staying up on the waiver wire and like. Because it does take a little bit of work and effort, Yeah. And I just was so like preoccupied last year that I just didn't really. I mean, I set my lineup, but I wasn't like super diligent. And so this year, I told myself I'm gonna try to put in a little more effort because my little brother's won twice in a row, and he just brags like crazy. So I can't have that happening anymore.
I can't let him get away with it. Yeah, I love that. And you're a Raiders fan, right? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, that's I grew up with all the Oakland teams back in the day, the A's and the Raiders, and those are my teams.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, as like a dummy to NFL, obviously we've got soccer over here. The only like kind of American style sport that I really watch is MMA and UFC, and the big brand of UFC. So how would it fit? So say, obviously you're a Raiders fan. So when you're looking for the draft, how does that then fit in with like Raiders? Are you biased towards potential Raiders players and stuff like that? Or how does that work?
I try not to. I try to pick up somebody from the Raiders just so I have somebody, even if they're on my bench. And I think I did. I think I got a wide receiver who's just going to sit on my bench. But I know guys that do that, and it never turns out well for them when they draft. They're like a Packers fan, and they draft like 5 guys from the Packers. So, yeah, I try not to let my personal bias get in the way of my draft picks. So... Yeah.
We set up as part of the channel for like the kind of fans and viewers to get along. We did like a bet, like a fight picks kind of version, and I dropped out of that about 6 weeks in. I couldn't keep up with them, so I was like, I can't be bothered anymore. You guys are too far ahead. I've had enough. So I'm similar to you in that way.
I know guys that have like they're on like 2 or 3 different leagues they're playing in, and I'm just like, dude, how do you have time for that? Yeah. Like I've done 2 in 1 year, one time, and I was like, never again. Because then you just like, because then you end up cheering for a defense on one end for one league, and then you're cheering for a wide receiver to score on the other side of it, and so you're like conflicted, and then you're just like, well, I don't know what I'm rooting for anymore.
Yeah, I need to. JK, he's quite a fan. I think he's a fan of the Chiefs, so he like watches quite a bit, but. Me myself, I find it quite a slow paced sport because you stop all the time, don't you? And then you change, like the whole team can change, and you're doing something else. And I'm just there, like I don't quite understand what's happening.
My next door neighbor's from Australia, and he's really been getting me into not only European football, but also rugby. He'll have me go into like rugby games at 6 a.m. with him, or going to watch it at a bar or something. He's like, yeah, we're going at 6 a.m. So I'll sometimes tag along with him and listen to when the black shirts played the South Africans in like the championship last year. He invited me to go with him to watch that game, and his buddy was from South Africa and he was from Australia, so they were like chirping back and forth the whole time. I was just having a good time. I don't understand that sport either. I'm like, why are they all hugging in a circle? But
Yeah.
it's fun to watch. I have fun.
Yeah, rugby's great, and we always have, like, if people start comparing the two over here, obviously over here we're very biased towards rugby, saying that the guys are a bit tougher because of obviously no pads and stuff, and just smashing into each other. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but they also don't have this big weapon on their head, this metal thing to ram into each other, you know? It's almost like
yeah,
bare knuckle boxing. I've heard guys that bare knuckle box, like, you have to be careful of your shot selection and, like, because if you hit a dude on the top of the temple,
yeah,
it might hurt you worse than it hurts him,
yeah.
break your hand. And so I wonder if rugby's a little bit more like that. Like, they're a little more diligent about where they're hitting and not just, I don't
Yeah.
know. Those guys are crazy, though.
Yeah, I've had some crazy stories. Ones that I probably can't say on here because it'll get taken down. But yeah, there's some crazy ones. Moving on slightly, I wanted to test kind of like some of the early years for like you professionally. And I was looking into is it Fat Albert's Pizza Company? Is that
Yeah,
right? In the
I
Titan
remember
FC
Fatty
days.
Alberts.
What I wanted to ask was, like, when you're fighting at places like that compared to the UFC, what's that kind of? Can you compare that? Because I've never been to like the Fat Alberts. I've been to the UFC when it's been in the UK, but I've never been to like the Fat Alberts local kind of. How is it
Like
as
the
a
small
fighter?
small scene. I hate it, honestly. I hate going to like amateur fights. We always got guys fighting, and everyone always is like, "Hey, you're gonna go to the fights?" And I'm always like, "Nah," just because the crowd is dicey, and like, there's a lot of guys in the crowd who are tough guys, and it's just not my
Mm.
scene. The regional scene, the smaller regional scene, yeah, it can be. I remember fighting on a Native American casino. We have a ton of Indian casinos around here.
Mm-hmm.
That's where back in the day, that's where all the fights were at. We're always at the casinos, and my first fight ever was at one, and the guy who was fighting right before me was literally dressed in jean shorts and was smoking a cigarette right before he walked out. And
Okay.
so, and I remember like sitting there in the back. I was like 19. I was like a sophomore in college, and I remember thinking like questioning my life choices a little bit because I was like, "What am I getting myself into, man?"
Think you're gonna end up like that guy?
Yeah, or just I don't know. I don't know. I think they were giving me $500, so I was pretty excited at 19 about that.
Yeah, 100%. Um, Speaking of kind of like those kind of weird experiences and looking at stuff and reflecting on it, the other thing I saw which really made me laugh was I'm going to butcher the name probably, but the pizza kebab advert where you're like in your gi with your gloves on and you're like sat there with a knife and fork. What was that about?
Well, there was this company. There was a little restaurant across the street from my apartment at the time, where me and my wife had got an apartment when we moved back to the valley, and she would always go there for lunch. And I'd never had Mediterranean food,
Mm,
and so she ended up getting me hooked on it. And I was eating there all the time, like getting their salads
okay.
to make. I'm dieting for fights and stuff, so I was always like, "Man, their salads are good. I'm just gonna eat there." But it was kind of pricey, especially at the age I was and the amount of money I didn't have. And uh, anyway, long story short, I ended up becoming friends with the guys who owned it, and they ended up sponsoring me for several years. They would just load up a gift card, and they would say, when the gift card runs out, let us know, and then we'll load it up again for you. So I ate there like every day. They ended up opening a bigger restaurant downtown with a bar and everything, and they've been doing really well. But yeah, they're still my buddies, my friends, and they're just a local restaurant. And they had me do an ad for them where I was in like my teaching outfit for one picture.
Yeah.
It was something along the lines of like work hard, play harder, or something. I don't know, but yeah, it was their vision. So yeah.
Yeah, it gave me a good chuckle. I saw that and I was like, I'm definitely going to speak to you about that because that's funny. Yeah, it was good. Now, obviously, going a little bit deeper now. Obviously, we've spoke about this previously, and I just want to go back to it to like kind of right to the beginning for yourself because we've got something kind of in common, and like I said, we just spoke about. But obviously, you've had quite a long journey going from where early days in MMA to now. But I wanted to take it really right back to the start. Obviously, you're being a huge part of your story, and that's when I first messaged you, was to kind of like reach out and ask you for some advice, which you replied to, and I was really appreciative of it. So I just wanted to talk about kind of how do you think that affected you growing up, and do you think part of that led you into kind of what you do today? So I guess to start off with, as someone that experienced it, is did you always know that you were adopted, or did you find out later on in life?
That was one thing my adopted parents made sure was that we were 2 and 3 years old. You
Mm.
know, there was some cognition. Like, we were human beings when we were adopted that could speak, and uh, so maybe that was a part of it. Maybe if I was a newborn, it would have been different. I just thought it was the right call to make, because had I found out at 15 or 20 years old, I feel like that would be a mind trip, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was good to always know this was my story. Uh, it's different than the other kids in my class or whatever, but
Mm.
it is what it is. So yeah, I think that was a good thing, to know from the time I was from as far back as I can remember.
Mm. Because I had it growing up with people like, especially like teachers at school, were kind of like sympathetic for you, but actually they don't realize how lucky you are. Like at the
Yeah.
time, like it's such a different perspective. But yeah, do you think that part of your life shaped you to become kind of who you are today? And that's not just as a MMA fighter, but obviously as a family man with your own wife and kids now. Do you think that's changed the way that you look at stuff?
Yeah, I think being adopted gives you perspective on, I think, gratitude,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
people don't realize, like, if it hadn't happened, where would I likely have been right now in my life? And like how would I have grown up? What would that have led me to? And I'm pretty certain it wouldn't have been good things for me. I have an addictive personality. It's very easy for me to get sucked into things and become just obsessed with them, addicted to them. And so, you put me in the wrong environment at 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old. I don't think I would have, you know, been able to do well in those environments.
Mm.
And so yeah, I definitely think I've always had like a sense of like I'm lucky to even be here. I'm not even supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to have done any of these things that I'm doing or have attempted to do or anything. It's like I should be at the bottom of a ditch somewhere. And so the
Mm.
fact that I'm not, I think it makes me at least feel like I want to utilize these opportunities to the maximum. Like I want to pursue whatever I'm going to pursue with everything I have, because, well, who the hell cares? I'm not even supposed to be here anyway.
Mm.
Like, I'm just lucky to even be here, so I might as well go all out with whatever I'm doing, because, I'm lucky to even have a shot at whatever it is I'm shooting for. I don't know.
Mm.
That's just kind of, I think it has framed my mind that way, which is a good thing, I think, for me.
I
And I
hope
know we
so.
talked about that, like motivation and things like that before, but yeah, I guess I just have a sense of like gratitude, that I have, the people in my life that I have that raised me, my parents raised me, and what I gained from that experience that I wouldn't have gained.
Mm.
And so, yeah, just trying to, you know, all of their sacrifices and the things that they did for me, I'm trying not to go to waste with it. Like utilize
Mm.
it and use it to grow, and that's kind of my thought. I don't know how you are, but that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, it's like I've recorded something and I'm listening to myself. Yeah, I think the one thing that I struggle to do though myself is sit back and reflect. I don't know how you are with that. Like kind of from a perspective of like, so as a child I was particularly naughty, and now I'm like doing okay. We'll say I'm doing okay and working hard. So I've now got my own family and stuff like that. But I feel, and everyone's always saying to me like, "Oh, you're doing so well," but I can never. It never sinks in for me. I don't know if I'm just always looking forward because I don't like to look back. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You work, like, I could only look at it in the context of like like fighting. Like you
Mm.
work really hard to win a fight, and then you put in all this effort and time and energy and everything you got for weeks and weeks and weeks, and years and years and years, really. And then after it's over, like I'm already thinking of the next thing because I'm like, okay, it's, like the thrill of victory is never as gratifying as I think it should be, or I don't know. There's always just the next thing. Okay, well, okay, that was good. We did what we said we were gonna do. We won or whatever, and then you're always like automatically moving on. What's next?
Yeah,
And
and that leads well into like the one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. And it's talk about that journey of your MMA career, because obviously, I mean, everyone probably who follows you and has heard of you and looked into you a bit obviously knows the story. Obviously, getting into tough and being a veteran. So you made it back into the UFC. You hit some bumps in the road. I mean, like if you, I think everyone calls out and mentions about Aljamain Sterling. Like, come on, like shit, man, why'd you have to give me him? Like, look who he is today. Obviously, you hit some bumps in the road. And then you're out the other side. And then in 2017, I think it was, you quit the sport, didn't you, for about a year and a half. What
yeah,
was going through your head at that time where you went, right, that's it. I'm done. I've had enough.
it wasn't that I had had enough. I just when I got cut from the UFC, and then within a year of being, I started teaching full time right after I got cut. Actually, before I even got cut, I'd already accepted a job, so I was going to the classroom anyway.
Okay.
And then it worked out. I mean, it didn't work out. I obviously would have wished they hadn't cut me, but when they did, I was like, well, I'm glad I took a job this year, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just told myself when I got cut that I would go back to the smaller shows, and I'm either going to win out, I'm going to go on another run, 3, 4, 5 fights, however many it takes to get back to the UFC. But if I lose in that process, then I'm just going to be done doing it, because my wife we were having a baby. I think we'd just had a baby.
Yeah.
And our first. And so I was just like, it wasn't really fair if I'm not going to make a good amount of money doing this to the amount, I knew the amount of time and energy it takes to train and prepare yourself. And so to me, in my mind, I was like, it's just not fair to my wife. It's not fair to my family if I'm being selfish and going to work all day and then, going to the gym for hours and hours after work. And so that was what I decided to do. And I told myself that from the get-go. And then so when I lost, I'd gone up a weight class. I was trying to do the double champ thing for the promotion I was fighting for.
Yeah.
I was actually winning the fight, and then I got caught in a submission. I actually hurt my shoulder too, and I think that was a part of like I just kind of froze in there and got submitted. And anyways, my last like submission loss, and right there in the cage afterwards, I just was like, "Yeah, I'm retiring. Thanks for all the good times. Peace out. I'm done." And that's what I thought. And I truly, on that night, in that moment, felt like I was happy, or I'm fine with it. It is what it is. And then, yeah, it just, I started coaching. I went back into coaching right after that. I was coaching high school wrestling and was keeping myself busy with the coaching. But as soon as the wrestling season ended, I just started finding myself trying to fill that void with, okay, I'm going to go back to jiu-jitsu a couple times a week. And then, man, I miss my old boxing coach. Let's go see him here and there. And then by the time you stop and look at it, you're like, damn, I've been training like every day. I'm like, I might as well just fight if I'm going to keep doing this, And
Yeah.
so that's what kind of brought me back. And my wife was like, you're not done fighting. And so we started back up. And then, we ended up, I had one fight after that. And then just to kind of get my feet wet again. And then it was for the LFA. And then after that, I thought, okay, I'm going all in. And I moved my whole family about 3 hours west of where we're at. So now I'm at the coast for better training opportunities and to live at the coast. So it wasn't all about training, but it was a part of it. And then COVID hit. So then I was like, that wasn't great. And then, so it's just been a wild ride, like the years have flown by, and then you look back and you're just like, damn, so much time has passed, and so many phases of your career that you go through where it looks like it's dire, you're like, oh, I might be done fighting, or I am done fighting. And then something always draws me back to it though. And I've been, since I moved about 4 years ago is when I just said, I'm going, all in again. And I've been staying busy ever since. So
at that time, were you thinking back to the UFC, or did you have other kind of plans? Where was your head at in terms of like the UFC as a promotion?
I mean, I think as I got older, it became less and less realistic to me. When I moved to the Central Coast and COVID started ending and they started opening up fights again, and I started getting busy fighting again. I thought maybe I'll get back. If I'm fighting big name guys, I'm fighting Ray Borg and John Dotson and some pretty big names from Francisco Rivera, guys who were all top 10 guys at one point or another. And so I thought maybe, but then I think, yeah, it was just, I remember when I got the call for Tough, I was really in a position where I was like questioning whether I should just be done doing it, because even though I was coming off a win, I was like, if the UFC is not going to sign me because I'm too old for them, like, what am I doing this for? Like, I have nothing to prove. And so I was really at a place where I was kind of sick and tired of fighting on the smaller shows for not very much money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even about the money for me. Fighting's never really been about the money, but it's like, if you're going to make this many sacrifices and your family's going to make this many sacrifices, you want it to be worth their while, And it was to the point where I was like, I fought Francisco Rivera for a title fight for a promotion down in LA and won the fight. And then I was just kind of remember thinking, man, I don't know, like, I don't want to keep doing this in this setting, And so, man, life is crazy how it works out. And, you get a text about the Ultimate Fighter, and that was a whirlwind experience. And then here we are a couple of years later and getting ready for my, I guess, fourth on this new deal. So,
yeah. You touched on as well, and I want to ask about it, coaching, and obviously how much you enjoy coaching kids and giving the kids the opportunity, well, especially with like some of the environments that kids can be in and grow up in. I always wondered, would you rather coach a kid to winning a UFC title, or would you rather win it yourself?
Oh, that's a good one. I'd rather coach a kid to win a wrestling state title.
not UFC, that's for you, right?
A lot of people assume I'm going to get my daughters or my son into fighting, and I'm like, unless they just like took to it and they wanted to, I'm going to support them in whatever they want to do. But I don't really have any interest. I want my son and I want my daughters to learn some self-defense and have some skills. Yeah. But my son, I probably will introduce him to the sport of wrestling for sure.
Yeah.
And try to get him involved with that. But if it was something that he wasn't into, I would be okay with that. But for fighting, I don't know. I don't really have any interest in my kids fighting as far as like, and even I just don't like, I don't know. I think you have to be real with people and honest with people about what this sport is when they get involved in it and what the sacrifices you're giving are. Because I think when you're 20 years old or 18 years old, you don't really see life like that. You don't see the future like that. You don't take into account the future. But I think you sit down and tell someone like, hey, just letting you know, you're going to have lifelong health issues as a result of the sport if you stay in it long enough. Like, you're going to have injuries that are going to be with you forever. You're going to have head traumas. You're going to have, it's a lifestyle that's lonely sometimes, Yeah. It's not, it's not as glamorous as people think. It's grinding and day after day making yourself do things that you don't always want to do and your body doesn't feel like it wants to do. So I don't know. I think I just, like, anyone I coached would, and that's the thing. I see a lot of kids and they're dipping their foot in MMA. Like, they're doing, I'm going to train after work every day for an hour.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, like, maybe that's why I don't like to go to a lot of the amateur fights too. It's like, I want to see someone who's like, yeah, I'm all in. Like, I'm living over there on the gym floor, like, because this is all I want to do 24 hours a day. And it's all I think about. That's the kid that's going to go somewhere. I don't know. I don't know if I want any of my students or my own children fighting unless it was just like me, like that it's in you,
Yeah. And you're right. I love that point about sacrifices, and fighting's obviously and what you've got to put in to succeed is intense, physically, mentally, emotionally, not just for you as well, but for like everyone around you.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, like, when you're now looking up for fights, so you're going to have to train in camp. You're going to do that. Obviously, at the end of after your last fight, you went on holiday with the kids and with the family. But when you have that time for like unwinding and winding down, like, can you paint me a picture of like what your perfect day off was? I was thinking in my head, I was listening to is it Merle Haggard
Hell yeah.
and sipping a Folgers Classic roast.
Yeah, that's about
What's your
it.
what is your like, go to? You like a bit of fishing as well, right?
I like to fish when I get the chances to, which isn't enough. But I like, yeah, usually if I have a day, like a good day or like a post fight day, I like a
Hmm.
cigar. I like a cigar.
Okay.
I like scotch is my drink of choice.
Hmm.
So like some scotch, cigar on a lake. Yeah. Maybe a little fishing would be nice too. Yeah. That's about it. That's about as good as it gets to me.
Can you drink scotch and fish at the same time, or does the scotch take over?
I'm not very good at fishermen to begin with, so
Anyway, November 2nd, obviously you're booked, seemingly creeping closer and closer. You said at the start that obviously you've finished with work now. You've got 10 weeks now. Is it 9 weeks? 10 weeks now. How's it looking at the moment? Are you nice and relaxed and ready to go, or what is it? Because obviously you're coming off a win with some momentum. I mean, like, it was first round? What is it? First round submission. I was running around the kitchen because I had the phone on the side. I was like, and also, how are you approaching this fight? It's interesting because last time you changed it up a bit, didn't you, in the preparation and sacrificed? Was that the first time you stopped working, took a break on the lead up to it? Was that the first time or not?
I mean, other than when it lined up, like because it was in the summer or something.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
on the holidays, yeah.
yeah, like sometimes I would try to line fights up so they would be in the summer, so it would give me time to do a full training camp. But yeah, that last fight was the first time I just took the time off work to focus on the training camp. Because the fight before that with Miles Johns, I tried to do a balancing act of teaching and training for a UFC fight, and I mean, I think it was doable. It was just a lot on my wife and my family, and
Mm,
I wasn't getting enough recovery and stuff because I was constantly training at 5 a.m., 4 p.m. to 7 or 8 p.m. And then, like, just your whole day was so packed. And then you don't, you go home and sleep for 5 hours and do it again. And,
mm,
it just was getting, and it was a lot on my family. So that's why I chose to take the time off. And this time around, I had some time off, some family leave because we had a baby. So I had kind of saved that family leave. So I
mm-hmm.
thought I'll do it whenever I get a fight. I'll take that family leave and be able to focus on training and be with my son more. So yeah.
Yeah. Did you notice a difference between the two, between being able to obviously have that more relaxed time, fit your schedule in a more sensible manner, should we call it? Because
Yeah.
working two jobs almost at the same time, that's got to be tough.
Yeah, I think for me, whenever I'm able to just put all my energy and focus on training camp, everything from my diet, my nutrition to my sleep and recovery and having,
Hmm.
the ability for me to like have the time to show up at the gym a little bit early to do some stretching and mobility,
Mm.
especially as I get older, it's just becoming more and more important, all the recovery stuff. So when I'm trying to balance teaching and training, even though I can get the amount of hours I need to be in the gym in, I can.
Mm.
I don't have the time for a lot of the recovery that I feel is becoming more and more necessary for me. Just so on my
Yeah.
daily, just so when I show up to the gym for a workout, I'm feeling good enough to put in a maximum effort.
Yeah.
If I'm bent over and sore and stiff and like yeah, I'm gonna still get through the workout, but it's not gonna be as good as if I was able to come in 45 minutes early and roll out and really get myself ready for this and then push myself. So it's just little things like that, really, for me. And then just being able to focus. I mean, the fight's the only thing I have to think about other than being a dad and, some of those responsibilities and a husband. I mean, it's really just the fight that's in front of me. So I like it like that because I just able to hone in on it and make sure that all my T's are dotted and I's or T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Yeah, I do that as well when I get them muddled. I was really off topic, but once upon a time I was in this like shared accommodation, and I don't know, I can't remember what happened. Some guy was like taking the mick out of me or something, and then I used to have like a bit of a mumble. I used to mumble quite a lot. I didn't enunciate my words. That's tough for me to say. And he was taking the mick, and I went, I just come straight off the top. I was like, I get my words waddled up. And he was just dying laughing at me. And I was just like, no, that's not just happened. One question I was thinking, because like this, like us writing out questions for this is really different, because we've kind of positioned this podcast for like not just for fighters but also for like content creators. We want to look at like behind the scenes stuff and kind of, so it's really, really diverse. And I was thinking like if I could sit down and ask you like one question, what would it be? And I was like, as I'm an RN, and then I thought, with your experience and where you've been, obviously from having the first run, going through what you went through, packing it in, going again, now you're back in the UFC after like amazing run in Tough. If you could sit down with your younger self, the version that like first joined the UFC, what would you say to them? Like, would you give them some advice or anything like that? Because I think there's a lot of people that potentially could listen to this, which are like dreaming of being in the UFC one day. And as a guy that's done it the hard way, it'd be really interesting to hear what you would tell yourself.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest regrets, and I'll admit it, it's probably a regret. People like to say, I don't have any regrets, but it's like, no, I regret doing this. I wish I would have gone left when I went right, or I would, whatever. But I always try to be sensible about fighting, and like I never. There were several times where I was like, maybe I should move to Sacramento and train at Team Alpha Male, or maybe I should move to Vegas and train at one of their big gym out there, or San Jose with AKA when they were kind of big. And I never took the leap,
Yeah.
And there were some things that were positive that came out of that. I have really good relationships with coaches that I had or that I started with that I still have good relationships with, and training partners and stuff. But I think that there was some fear baked into that decision to like, I'm going to play it safe. Okay. I'm going to stick near to home. I'm going to pursue. And this was, a lot of this you could view in different contexts, because you could be like, these are all really good decisions. Oh, I'm going to keep going to school. I'm going to get a teaching credential while I'm fighting. Things I was pursuing outside of fighting, because I just was afraid to just say, I'm going to just go after this. And so I wish I would have. I wish I would have been 22 or whatever and been like, yeah, I'm just going to pursue this 100%, and I'm going to live on, top ramen for a while, for a few years more, because that was most of college already. But I wish I would have, and I didn't. And maybe my path would have been different, better. Maybe it would have been worse. I don't know, but yeah. I think that, like we were kind of talking about earlier, if this is what you want to do, then it needs to be, you have to understand that it is all you are going to be about. You have to be obsessed with it, like this has to be your obsession, because there's guys out there all across this country, all across this world, that, I see him in Vegas. I'm like, this kid's from Israel, like there's a kid from Israel there, and he's just living on the mats, and like, there's these different people from all over the world, and they're just, this is everything I got right here is how this goes. And they're 3-0, and they're still a ways away from even getting an opportunity in the UFC, and so once you see that and you know that exists, I think that you got to, at 20 years old, 21, that's got to be the mentality. That decision has got to be made. Like, I'm either going all in on this or I'm not going to do it, And I feel like I kind of always had, I was training constantly, but I always, I was working, and you got to work, you got to make money, So, maybe I'm being hard on myself, but I don't know. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's just kind of what I was thinking.
No, yeah, I think there's a lot of weight to that. When I have like days where I struggle to get motivated, I am that cheesy guy that sometimes watches a motivational video on YouTube just to kind of get me amped up. And they always, like, one of the common themes they always say is you've got to be willing to like sacrifice everything. Like, some things that you wouldn't be comfortable sacrificing, you've got to sacrifice, and sometimes that is what you've got to put in. I think you're right, because you're quite, you know Josh Emmett quite well, right? And he did that, didn't he? He was like kind of local, regional, and then he made the jump to alpha male, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was a little more fortunate in the fact that he's born and raised in Sacramento, so it was kind of an easier fit for him. He had a great gym right where in his hometown.
Yeah.
But I mean, Josh didn't get started in fighting until he was pretty old, you know.
Yeah.
He used to come to my fights when I was in college. I was already fighting, and there's a picture of him at one of my fights just before he even had his first pro fight. He's just there hanging out, drinking beers with my buddies, like, you know.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I'm actually I'm gonna see him this weekend. Actually, I'm going up to Sacramento.
Nice. Yeah, that man's got some scary power, doesn't he? For the size of the, but Jesus Christ, the way he just knocks people out, it scares the hell out of me.
He is a freak athlete.
Yeah.
He always has been a freak athlete, like the kind of guy who could just like do standing backflips and like just has ridiculous power. And he's also a workhorse. He works his ass off, and he's a super humble guy. So yeah, Josh is got a lot of respect and love for that guy.
We've had some breakdown shows, and we joked about the fact that he doesn't need any technique because he's so powerful. He doesn't get to show the technique. He just knocks them out like so early on, and then he just went on a run to like top 5, didn't he? Just from absolutely starching people.
Yeah, he just explodes forward with those big loopy overhand rights, you know.
And then they're on the floor sparked. Anyway, now that you're back in the UFC, coming off of a submission win, you start to build momentum, and I think like everyone loves quite a good like comeback story, and you're like right on the path for producing like I think quite a special one. But what is your plan for like? So I know it's a tough one to answer. I know, but let's say like the next year. Is there any specific? Have you set yourself any like goals, or I know you've spoken about some dream fights in terms of fighting like Cub Swanson and stuff like that. But like just specifically individually for you, what have you got your eyes on?
I try to just, you know, one fight at a time. You know, this is what's in front of me. This is the hill to climb and to conquer. And we'll see where it goes. You know, I would like to, obviously, I think the UFC has been giving me fun fights with guys that like to fight, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see. I'm here to test myself and see how good I am, and who's better than me and who I'm better than. Those are the questions I'm trying to get answered. So, you know, I think I try to just focus on one at a time. I don't know what happens, you know. For me, I don't know how much I think about like, oh, okay, well, is there any way you could ever fight for a title or be a champion? I don't know, you know. At my age, you look at things, you're like, I don't know if that's conceivable. I know crazier things have happened in the sport. You know, they always, like, the sport is insane, so never say never, but that's not really been my focus. It's like, I think for me, I've been sacrificing for so long, and my family's been sacrificing, especially my family, my wife, that I'm like, I want to make it worth our while, like worth our time, you know, like I want to be able to use fighting as a way to put my family in a position that is better than we would have otherwise been in. And not that like, you know, we're living on breadcrumbs. My wife and I both have, you know, are stable and have careers and everything, but
yeah, just
putting ourselves on a better footing. And if I could use fighting to do that, you know, that would be a feather in my cap, and like, okay, it was all worth it, because in the end, it helped us put our kids through school, or it helped us put the down payment on that house, or whatever that it is. That doesn't really matter, but that's where my mind is now. Is like, I want to get wins. Obviously, I want to stick around for a few years here, and I want to get bonuses. I was pissed off I didn't get the bonus last time. I was pissed off because every fight before mine was a freaking complete.
It was decisions, weren't they? I think
they were not only just decisions, but they were like not good decisions. They were like nothing burgers, you know, like. Then I was like, and then I didn't even think about it. And then after my fight, I was like, oh damn, that was the first finish of the whole night. I was like, I'm definitely getting a bonus.
Yeah. First round, the lot, yeah.
And then every fight after mine was a knockout, and so I was pissed about that. So now I gotta go, and now this next fight in Canada, they're like stacking this card. There's a bunch of savages on it that always get bonuses. So I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to do something special.
It's pretty much that's probably filled all my questions.